People who've accidentally caught someone in their birthday suit. What's your story? Story 1. When I was young, I can't really remember, but I remember living in a trailer park. A whole bunch of family members lived there too. So my cousins and I were playing around when we decided to go see my aunt's newborn baby. We knocked on the door, no answers. And then seconds later, my little cousin opened the door. The baby was crying, so we went into the master bedroom. No adult was there. Then I asked my little cousin where his parents were, and he said Dad is in Aunt Lucy's bedroom. Lucy was the little cousin's mom's sister. My cousins and I thought we should be good kids and tell my uncle that the baby was crying. So we barged into Aunt Lucy's bedroom. She was spread out and my uncle was banging the heck out of her. They both quickly got up and he slammed the door in our faces. My cousins and I ran out of there scared and shocked. That's how we found out my uncle was cheating on his wife with his wife's sister. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. A friend of mine texted me to come hang out and told me just to walk in when I got there. So, I got there about 20 minutes later and walked in on him soloing off. He said he was bored and started doing his stuff. He forgot he had texted me to come over. Exactly a week later, he showed up at my house unannounced and walked in on me soloing off. Story 3. When I was in high school, I was dating a girl from a different school whom I met through a friend. She lived in a bareness colony. One night, she invited me over to pick her up and go out, but she wanted me to meet her parents. She assured me they'd be clothed. They were having a party and roasting a pig outside. It was winter in Florida, which means temperatures in the 70s and dark by 5:30. When I got there, she took me into the living room and went to get her parents from the yard. When they came back in, they were both completely bare except for shoes, and her smoking hot mom was wearing a 4-inch tall pumps, which put her amazing chesticles right in my face as she hugged me, and then I had to shake her dad's hand. My mind went ballistic trying not to look at them, but also trying not to look like I was trying not to look. Then they took me out back and introduced me to everyone else at the party. All unclothed. Story 4. While I was in the Air Force, I was asked to help the first sergeant with dorm inspections. The dorm setup had 2 rooms sharing a bathroom, with doors opening from each side. The routine was to enter one room, inspect it, check the bathroom, then inspect the other room before moving on. We got to one set, and the bathroom door was locked. I knocked, no answer. So I had to go around, cross the hall, and enter the other room. I accidentally went into the wrong room and opened the bathroom door to find the female resident completely unclothed with her foot up on the sink, shaving her legs. I saw everything. I quickly backed out and went to the correct room. About 10 minutes later, she caught up to us and started yelling at the first sergeant, who had no idea what was going on. I apologized and took the blame. She just laughed, said okay, and walked away. Story 5. Many moons ago, I was a cop in the military. One of the guys I worked with, Graham, had a truck that he was going to let me borrow to move some furniture to my new place. He gave me his address, let's call it 21 Illinois Street. I showed up and knocked on the door several times, but there was no answer. After he didn't reply to my text, I assumed he was busy inside, so I checked the doorknob. It was unlocked. I went inside, and just as I shut the door behind me, I saw the largest dog I had ever seen staring me down from the end of the hallway. It looked like a pit bull mixed with a rhinoceros. It charged at me. I fumbled with the doorknob, but it was jammed, and I couldn't figure it out in time before the dog pounced. Luckily, it started furiously licking me. Apparently, this dog was as friendly as it was enormous. I petted the dog as my adrenaline settled, and prepared to curse out Graham for not warning me that he had a small mammoth as a pet. I called out to Graham a few times, looking around downstairs and in the backyard. I didn't find him, so I walked up the stairs. Now, I knew Graham was married, but I had never seen his wife. Graham is a great guy, but he's not what you'd call conventionally attractive. I didn't know what to expect. But it certainly wasn't this absolutely stunning woman who walked out of the bathroom at that moment completely bare except for the towel wrapped around her hair. She saw me just a fraction of a second after I saw her, screamed and tried to cover herself with her hands. I got a full frontal view. I immediately covered my eyes and said, "Oh my God, I am so sorry," then turned and walked downstairs, kicking myself for ending up in this situation. I couldn't help but think that Graham must be some kind of low-key prodigy or wunderkind, because this woman was so far out of his league, it was like a toddler from a daycare t-ball team playing for the Yankees. After a minute, she came downstairs wearing the towel and asked what I was doing there. I told her I was there to borrow Graham's truck to move some furniture. She paused, then said she thought I was in the wrong house. I pulled out my phone to show her. Graham had definitely texted me 21 Illinois Street, and I saw the big 21 on the door. She informed me that we were on Oregon Street. Illinois was the next street over. The color drained from my face as I asked, "Are you telling me I just wandered into some random woman's house and saw her unclothed?" She replied, "Yes, yes you did," while giggling. I stammered out more apologies as she kept laughing at me, and we bantered a bit about how worthless her dog was as a guard. Turns out her doorknob was broken, so she couldn't even lock it. Eventually I said, "Well, I guess I should go now." As I turned to leave, I had a crazy thought. I turned back and said, "You know what? This is a wild story. If it ends here, that's totally fine. But I kinda wanna see if it goes anywhere. So, if you wouldn't mind, I could write down my number for you, and you can text or call me later if you'd like to go out sometime." She said shed like that and went to get a pen and paper. I figured writing down my number and leaving wouldn't put pressure on her. It gave her the choice to reach out if she wanted, instead of me asking for her number directly. I wrote it down and left, feeling a strange mix of emotions but ultimately kind of like a badass, since I normally didn't have the stones to make a move like that. Then I went to Graham's actual place to tell him the story, and he didn't believe me. Not until mid-conversation when I got a text from her saying that I owed her dinner. From that moment on, Graham decided I was some kind of demigod and told anyone who would listen that I was a female whisperer. I wish I could say that was true and that this story ended with me proclaiming she's my wife now, but I fumbled the follow-up, and things fizzled after a couple of dates. She was awesome. It was a real great white buffalo situation for me. Story 6. I work in apartment maintenance. I got a work order that I was authorized to go into the unit without the tenant being there. I did the same protocol as I always do. I knocked 3 separate times, identifying myself as maintenance each time. No answer. I let myself in, walked all the way to the back bedroom where the problem was, and then I heard her bathroom door opening from between me and the entry door. She walked out, fully bare. She was maybe 65 or so. She screamed. I screamed. And we all screamed for me to get out of there. She didn't complain or anything. But now she tries to talk when I see her. I am just going to say it. Her chesticles were still nice and supple for an old lady. Story 7. I was around 12 years old, and my school had dismissed us early one day on short notice. They sent the buses to pick us up early and everything. At this time, my mom had her then best friend, whom she met through church live with us, to help pay rent and bills. She had been living with us for a couple of years before this day. I walked home from the bus stop to see our married church choir director's Jeep parked in our driveway. Weird. So I walked through the front door and saw the church choir director's cakes as he scurried to hide in his roommate's room. Her room was right next door to my room, but on the opposite side of the house where the front door and my mom's bedroom were. I ran into my mom's room and slammed the door shut, making sure to lock it, and hid in the back of my mom's closet until my mom came home from work 4 hours later. I was hysterical because I thought I was going to get in trouble for catching her roommate in the act. The friendship quickly crumbled shortly thereafter, and the roommate eventually moved out. This married choir director was very active in the church with a gorgeous wife who had just finished recovering from breast cancer, and the church congregation just loved her to pieces. Story 8. I went over to a friend's house in college to hang out. I knocked on his bedroom door and yelled, "Yo, it's me." I heard what I thought was his girlfriend say, "Hey kid." So I opened the door and walked right in on his girlfriend standing by the bed, completely bare, palms up, with an expression that screamed, "What the heck?" That's when it hit me. Shed actually said, "naked." I was in shock and blurted out, "Oh, that's what you said." She gave me an even bigger what the feff look, and I bolted out the door. Luckily, after she got dressed and came out, I explained the mix-up. She laughed it off, and for a while after that, both she and her boyfriend would yell, "Hey kid," whenever they saw me. Story 9. My mum's lodger is pre-op trans, and for a while during her transition, We would have random trans friends around the house from time to time. One day, however, I came home to find a 19-year-old post-op male to female unclothed on my sofa. What's more, she had recently gotten her new hoo-ha and was using what I can only describe as a large plug to break in her new stuff. I literally froze and then kind of shouted that she couldn't do that in my house whilst averting my eyes. Also at the time, I was maybe 20, and I remember the 19-year-old being very attractive, and it made me feel really weird because I knew she was once a boy, but she was very much all woman, and young me did not know how to deal with it. She was also very casual about the whole thing and didn't seem to see any issue. We actually got into a huge argument about it. I thought that you should go round breaking in your stuff unclothed on a stranger's sofa, whilst she and my mum's lodger insisted it was perfectly fine and natural, and tried to suggest I was being transphobic. To this day, I still think I was right to be weird about it, and that the trans element had nothing to do with the fact that there was a stranger unclothed on my sofa. The lodger lived in a converted garage, fitted with its own bedroom, living area, and bathroom. Whilst it was fine for them being in the house, it just seemed weird. Someone would be so casual doing something that private, publicly in someone else's house. Story 10. I was backpacking, and I came across another hiker who had just been skinny dipping and was sitting on the ground, unclothed to dry off. I stopped to chat for 10 minutes, because I had stayed by myself for the last couple of nights and was starving for human interaction. Figured he would mind because being a free spirit was kind of the default on the trail, and he made no move to get dressed, just sat in a way that granted some coverage. We ended up hiking together for a few days, and he later mentioned how he had felt pretty awkward. I also ended up giving him a multi-hour lift back when we finished, so there are no hard feelings. Story 11. I work in a predominantly male industry. We have men's and women's locker/shower rooms, but all of our uniforms are stored in the same room, which happens to be located right outside the men's locker room. I walked into said room to grab my uniforms, and I happened to walk in right at the exact time that the maintenance men were getting ready to leave. The double doors swung wide open, and there it was. An unidentified coworker, unclothed as the day he was born. The whitest backside I have ever seen. The moon would be jealous of how bright his rear shone. I only saw it for a second, but that image is burnt in my brain forever. Months later, I was telling this story to a co-worker friend. He asked me if I knew who it was, where the person was standing, etc. I never saw the man's face to properly identify him, but he figured it out. It was him. Story 12. I was on a double date of sorts, and after dinner, we went back to my friend's and his wife's house. We were hanging out drinking, and after a while, my friend and I noticed the girls had left. He decided we should go look for them, and I helpfully suggested they're probably making out on the beach. He didn't think that was funny. After a little searching on the beach, we stumbled across them banging each other. Once again, I think I was the only one who thought it was funny. Story 13. I was working as a receptionist for a multi-tenant business building in central London. This woman comes in and asks if she can use the loo. Now I usually check the person out to make sure they're not homeless or a substance user, because it could be a health and safety issue if they decide to use drugs on the premises and overdose. Anyway, she looks okay. About 40 minutes later, the engineer of the building and I are talking when he reminds me that the lady hasn't left the loo. So, I go knock and make sure she is okay. As soon as my knuckles hit the door, it slowly opens wide. The woman is completely unclothed, washing her armpits. There are stained tissues all over the floor. I assume she was washing her body with wet tissues. We both stood there in shock. I mean, I could see everything. So, when I finally got my senses back, I asked her to leave immediately. I went back to the reception, open-mouthed. The engineer couldn't believe what happened, but at the end of the day, I'd rather have to deal with an unclothed lady than an overdose. Story 14. I have a pretty funny story of how I got caught. Just because of the context. My husband lived with a roommate for 2.5 years, with a shared bathroom with a wonky lock. So many times, I was afraid to be caught by his roommate when I would dart to the bathroom for a post-smoosh pee, or in the middle of the night when I couldn't be bothered to put on more than his t-shirt to go to the bathroom, but it never happened. Then, the day my husband and I moved in together, his buddies helped us with the move. We were supposed to meet for brunch afterwards. I went upstairs to shower while the others left. At least, I thought they'd all left. The old roommate went upstairs to use the restroom right as I walked out of it, fully unclothed. 2.5 years with no accidental full frontal, and he saw me in my birthday suit the day we moved out. Story 15. When I was 11 or 12, some distant cousins were in town for a wedding, and my parents put up the bride and a couple of bridesmaids in my bedroom. All of them were my mom's cousins' kids, so like my second cousins or something. I slept in the basement while they were in town. The girls were all in their 20s except one who was my age. She and I were playing in the basement, and I wanted more Legos or whatever. I ran up to my room to get them and never even thought about knocking on my own door in the middle of the day. Unbeknownst to me, my older cousins were all in my room changing for the rehearsal dinner, and I burst in. I saw all of them in various stages of dress, from fully unclothed to half-covered, all happily chittering, chatting excitedly about the wedding. This was the first time I saw a woman unclothed outside of a few pictures in magazines my dad kept under his dresser. As the story goes from their perspective, I burst into the room, looked each of them up and down, and got the biggest grin on my face. Said I should have knocked and tiptoed out of the room like I was sneaking away as they all cackled at me. They came from a family of 8 kids, so someone was always walking in on someone in their house, and it wasn't that out of the ordinary. There was no screaming and yelling. No one even thought enough of it to tell my mom. Apparently at the reception, although I do not remember this, I walked up to the groom in front of his parents, and some of the groomsmen sheepishly said something like, "Sir, I saw Beth, my cousin, the bride, unclothed yesterday, and I am really sorry. It was an accident. Please don't beat me up." I had never met Ron until then. He had no idea who I was, so after he said he wasn't going to beat me up, I shook his hand and said congratulations and walked back to the kids' table. He goes over to his new wife and tells her what I said, and then it becomes the running joke of the evening. What I do remember was the drunken 20-somethings had a blast with it, and all the bridesmaids made me dance with them. The guys ribbed me all night, asking me all kinds of inappropriate questions, like which one had the best rack and which one would I marry, and being a dumb kid, I answered them all truthfully, which just got them going even more. I am in like a dozen wedding photos dancing with one of the bridesmaids in the background. I see them once every 5 years or so at some family funeral or wedding. I hear about it every time I see them. At every reception and wake, I just know after a couple of whiskeys, Ron is going to bring up how the first time he met me, I informed him I saw his wife unclothed, shook his hand, and said congratulations. Story 16. I lost one of my best friends because of an overreaction. I knew of him through college, but had never spoken to him until I started dating one of his girlfriend's friends. They had been together for a few years at this point. The 4 of us and a few others in the friend group went camping over the summer shortly after she and I started dating, and we all slept in one large tent. One morning, I was still dozing when everyone else had gotten up and around already. His girlfriend came in and either didn't see me in my sleeping bag or assumed I was totally asleep and started changing clothes. I opened my eyes as she was taking off her shirt and briefly saw her chesticles. I reacted with audible surprise and apologized. She said something like, "Oh, it's cool, no worries," and turned around. I didn't think anything of it and didn't mention it to my girlfriend or friend for fear of causing unnecessary drama. I was still really new to a long-established friend group and wasn't quite aware of the vibe, and didn't want to come off as a perv for making a big deal out of it or anything. Fast forward to more than a year later, and my friend and I are both no longer with those girls. As stated, he was my best friend, and I felt like I could tell him anything or come to him with any problem. He comes over one day to hang out, and we start talking about our ex-girlfriends and the drama that occurred during that period of our lives. He confides in me that his ex was cheating on him for a long period with a girl whom she went on to be in a relationship with after dumping him. I mentioned our weird interaction in the tent while camping, and he lost it. Very visibly upset though, he was trying to hide it, then later texted me asking if I was lying. Apparently, he also asked his ex if it was true, and she lied about it, saying it was completely made up, and asked my ex if I ever told her. He concluded that I must be lying for some reason, and decided that he needed to cut off all contact with me. It sucks to lose a friend over something so stupid, but I am holding out hope we can reconcile in the future at some point. Story 17. I work as a handyman. So, part of my job is visiting people's houses to install or fix their stuff. I went to a house to install smoke detectors in bedrooms. I arrive and a woman lets me in, and I tell her that I will be entering all of the bedrooms, and I ask her if anyone else is home. She says no. The very first bedroom that I enter had an unclothed dude asleep on his bed. On my way out, I inquired from the woman why she told me no one else was home. She apparently forgot about the sleeping dude. Story 18. Merida, Mexico. I check in at the front desk of the hotel and they give us the key to the room. I walked in on one of the maids working her side gig, entertaining a client, and got a free upgrade to the best room in the place. The hotel was Hotel Caribe, located on the corner of C58 or C59. Other than the free show, I wouldn't recommend it. However, I highly recommend Hotel La Mission de Fray Diego, 2 blocks north of the cathedral on C61. Story 19. I was at my girlfriend's house. It was at night, and we were sleeping on the first floor while her parents were sleeping downstairs, near the kitchen. The thing is, I got a little thirsty, so I decided to go to the kitchen for water. While I am entering the kitchen, it turns out that her mother, who was unclothed, had the same idea. We entered the kitchen at the same time, in front of each other, so we looked at each other and ran back to our rooms. It was not funny at the moment, but speaking of it with everyone the morning after, we had quite a laugh. Also, when I was in high school, I was going to the gym. Everybody knew each other, and the showers were not closed, only between sexes. Guys showered with the other guys, etc. So once my sport is over, I decide to go take a shower, so I take my clothes off, take my stuff, and go to the shower room. Once I enter, I don't really look around, and I hear someone saying my name. It was one of my teachers from high school. It was pretty weird at first, but we talked like we had our clothes on. Thinking of it was also funny. Story 20. When I get too drunk, I tend to abandon the party and sneak off to sleep. It was my 30th birthday party, and I had this particularly peer-pressury friend who was there. It was around 1 a.m. I was absolutely blitzed, and I thought that if I stayed up any longer, things would end poorly for me. So I snuck off to bed. I often sleep with no clothes on, and proceeded to do so that evening. While lying in bed, still awake at this point, I hear my friend scream from downstairs, "Where did that guy go?" And I know it's only a matter of time before he starts searching the house for me. In my drunk brain, I assumed that if he came upstairs, opened my bedroom door, and saw my bed empty, then that would be the end of the search for the room. So I scrambled into my closet and sat Indian style in my dirty laundry hamper, dirty laundry and all. He comes upstairs with the entire rest of the party in tow, looks in my room, sees the bed empty, and immediately heads towards the closet. Needless to say, they found me sitting there. Story 21. When I lost my chip to access school, I went to my homeroom teacher to ask for a new one. He shares his office thingy with our math teacher. I knocked and heard "Come in," so I opened the door and the math teacher was sitting there trying to put his pants on. He said something and I didn't really hear what, but I assumed he told me to get out, so I yeeted out. I was speedwalking half across the hallway when he peeked out of the door with his pants half down, yelling at me to come back. Math classes have been really awkward for me since then. Story 22. I accidentally caught my sister's friend's mom changing in her garage. I was like 12 years old, and we were spending the night over because my mom didn't trust us staying at the house alone. I was coming back from the gas station, oblivious to everything around, and just casually strolled into the garage. By the time we both realized we were there, I was like 10 feet from her, oh babies, all out in the air. My whole face just turned red. She started laughing, and didn't even try to cover up. I was stuck from embarrassment, and didn't move, but was still watching. She rummaged through her clothes in the washing machine, and then put her shirt on. She walks over and says, "Don't worry," as she hugs me, pressing my face in between her love bags. Then I just walked into the house like nothing happened. Story 23. In my early teens, my sister was having a big party, and my elder brother had a few friends over for it. One of those friends was changing in my room, and I walked in on her full frontal. My brother's response was to be jealous that I'd seen her unclothed and not him. Camping the other week, and one of my friends was changing out of her bikini. I was grabbing a drink and walked in on her. She puts on a t-shirt, and I say I didn't see anything. And her response was a very flirtatious, "Yeah, you did." We were all doing a run down a ski slope. When everyone went to get their clothes, I got changed and rode to where we were meeting. One of the guys had basically put his clothes there, and as I went around the corner, he was getting the blood flowing. A whole lot more woody than I wanted. Story 24. I went to pick up my sister at her friend's house when I was 19 and my sister 18 with my mom. We ended up going inside for coffee and to chat with the other mom, and after a while I went to call my sister since we had to leave. The problem was that I simply opened the bedroom door without knocking and there was my sister's friend completely bare just out of the shower. I was paralyzed, and so was she. I am not sure how many seconds went by, but we were just there, standing and looking at each other. It's worth mentioning she was very pretty and my sister had already mentioned she had a small crush on me. Anyway, when I regained control of my body, I just closed the door without saying anything and went looking for my sister who was in the other room packing her books and school materials, and we left shortly after. The girl and I never told what happened to anyone, or even talked about it. It was like it never happened. Last but not least, we ended up hooking up a few weeks later, and we're still good friends today. Story 25. There was this girl who I had a crush on but was afraid to make a move on, but I used to hang out with her a few days a week. I think she had the same problem. She would ask me to come over and massage her. It worked out fine for us both. So, one day I went over to the house and her mom told me she was taking a shower and to wait for her in her room. She walked in completely unclothed, not even a towel, freaked out, and ran back to the bathroom to get a robe. After a few minutes she was like, "Well, now you've seen it all anyway." It broke the ice, and we had a little fun for a few weeks, after which it got boring. I guess the game of almost trying something and seeing how far we could get with each other was what kept it interesting for us both. The second time was when we were chilling at a buddy's house, listening to music. When I got thirsty and walked to the kitchen, in the hall, his 50-plus-year-old mom walked in with an open bathrobe, saggy chesticles and all. We both screamed silently, and that was the last time I went there. I never told the dude. Story 26. Working in hotels. You see a lot of people in such situations. From your perspective, it's accidental. From theirs, they'll often do it deliberately. Most of them tend to be the standard stories, like a woman orders room service and is unclothed when you deliver it as a prank, or a guest wakes up in the early hours to use the bathroom, is too sleepy or too drunk to realize they've used the wrong door, and ends up in the hallway instead, then comes to the front desk asking to be let back into their room. On one occasion, the hotel's general manager managed to lock himself out of his room while completely bare. And sometimes, during an hourly patrol, you'll just happen across naked people walking to or from each other's rooms or sleepwalking. But the oddest one I ever had personally was when my coworker and I were sitting down in the lounge watching TV and having a snack. I heard what sounded like the hotel's internal fire doors closing. During the day, we use electromagnetic locks to hold them open, but at night, for fire safety, the locks get released and they all stay closed. I thought maybe it was a customer coming to the front desk. From where I was sitting, the view of the desk was blocked by a wall. Likewise, anyone approaching it couldn't see me. I got up and took 3 steps to check. No one there. Odd, I thought, and went back to my snack. My coworker, who was sitting further into the lounge, hadn't heard the door at all and figured I was imagining things. About 30 minutes later, I heard the doors again. I got up faster this time, and just as I got a sightline, I saw the door closing, and through it, a woman jogging away, completely bare. I told my coworker. He didn't believe me. So, I returned to my spot, just out of sight from the entrance, and waited. Another 30 minutes passed. The doors opened. I stepped out instantly. Yup, same woman, jogging laps around the hotel, unclothed. As soon as she saw me, she let out a sound I can only describe as a squeak, spun around and bolted down the hallway. I never saw her again. Why was she jogging around the hotel repeatedly in the early hours of the morning? Why was she unclothed? These are questions I will never have answers to. Over 15 years later, it's still incredibly puzzling. It's not the strangest thing I've seen while working in hotels, but it is definitely the strangest thing involving an unclothed stranger. Oddly enough, it was never men who were unclothed when receiving room service. I suspect if I were a woman, though, I'd have seen a lot more unclothed men than women when delivering food or drinks. Story 27. Back in 2015, I started working at a hostel, and during an afternoon shift, my manager asked me to check the 6-bed dorm to see if the guest who had checked out that morning had left her wallet behind. The new guests had already checked in, so I followed procedure, knocked before entering. Someone inside shouted to come in, so I did. Everybody was unclothed. All 6 people, 2 guys and 4 girls, were just walking around doing their own things, completely nude, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. The oddest part? They didn't seem to be a group. They weren't interacting much with one another, and I never saw them engage again in the common areas after that. Just 6 strangers, totally unclothed, coexisting like that, was standard dorm etiquette. Story 28. When I was 11 years old, my next-door neighbor paid me to feed her cats while she was on vacation. She gave me a key to her house, and I was supposed to go into the master bathroom to clean the litter boxes. One day, as I was walking back there to the bedroom, I accidentally walked in on a man and woman banging. I left my flip-flops in the hallway and tiptoed out of the house. Hours later, I returned with my mother to take care of the animals, only to find that man back, holding my flip-flops in his hand. He was the married little brother having an affair, using his sister's house while she was away. He told me he was supposed to care for the animals for the rest of the week, and that I shouldn't come back, or should leave my key. He was a police officer too. The story goes on, but the main takeaway is that I saw 2 people in the act. Story 29. I used to work at Hollister Clothing in college. One day I am doing the fitting room, and a couple comes in, but only the woman has clothes to try on. They both go down the aisle, and she goes into the room, and he just sits there watching her change with the door open. I was super busy, so I didn't really process what I was looking at, even though it was right in front of me. Well, eventually I had to walk down to one of the other changing rooms and look over, and there was a mostly bare woman just standing there. I looked at the dude, and he just smiled. In retrospect, they were definitely doing some kind of exhibition thing and were trying to get others in on it. Story 30. I was at a hostel in Mexico and decided to take the bus to the next town over. It was pretty late at night, and I walked to the bus stop. Turns out the bus wasn't running anymore that night. So, I went back to the hostel to find out that they didn't have any more rooms available. I persuaded the host to let me sleep on the couch in the lobby in exchange for buying beers for the staff. Later that night at around 5 a.m., I woke up to some noise. There's this dude in the hallway fully unclothed. I don't know what was going on, but he was just standing there frozen, probably hoping I didn't see him. I shouted, "What the heck are you doing, my guy?" And he ran off down another hallway. Story 31. I worked at a university dive bar doing security, and caught so many people in various states of undress trying to give blowy in the bathroom stalls over the years. I'd give a verbal warning first if I caught more than one person in a stall, but if they ignored me, I'd eventually have to bust the door open and forcibly remove them. Lots of chesticles and the occasional flash as they would scramble to get dressed as I tried to eject them. We had LGBTQ nights, so lots of same-sex bangings, both genders. Some would flash you just for fun too, but I guess that doesn't count as accidental. I get it. I have my fantasies too, but for God's sake, don't give head to someone sitting on the public toilet at a dingy dive bar. Story 32. Only once, when I was in my late teens, there was a girl I had a massive crush on. Someone I thought was way out of my league, who was staying at the same house as me for about a week. She was changing in one of the recreation rooms because someone else was using her room. Not knowing she was there, I barged in unannounced and found her completely bare in the middle of putting on her undies. I felt awful and apologized a million times, but she was surprisingly calm and just laughed it off. That didn't stop me from apologizing 300 more times, of course. Well, one thing led to another, and the next day we hooked up and ended up dating for a while. This is also how I lost my V-card. So, needless to say, it could have gone a lot worse. Story 33. When I was in college, I had 2 roommates. One of my roommate's girlfriends was over, and the 4 of us were all hanging out in the living room and playing video games. We were hungry, so one of my roommates and I left to go get a pizza. I had forgotten my wallet, so I came sprinting in like only 3 minutes after we left to quickly grab my wallet. I flipped the door open and jogged down the hall towards my room, passing the kitchen along the way. In the corner of my eye, I see my other roommate and his girlfriend on the kitchen floor. Both bare, she was on her back, getting smashed hard by my roommate. It happened quickly, and I grabbed my wallet and yelled out sorry and ran back out. They didn't even stop. I came back with pizza 15 minutes later, and we all acted like nothing happened. Story 34. My wife and I were in Paris, in a cute little Airbnb apartment. On our second to last night, as we got home, I heard what sounded like a radio coming from the vacant apartment next to ours. There was construction happening on the building, and that apartment was completely empty and full of equipment, with an old door half covering the entrance. While my wife was getting ready for bed, I thought I'd go investigate. I figured one of the workers had left their radio on, and I'd turn it off if it didn't disturb our sleep. So, I have my phone flashlight on because it's dark on the landing and in the vacant apartment. I quietly open the beat-up old door and start to look around with the flashlight for the offending radio when I point down at the floor right inside the entrance and get a face full of a homeless Frenchman's body. The homeless dude had found the empty apartment and was sleeping there. It was summer and there was no AC, so I guess he decided to sleep unclothed. I quietly said, "Sorry, pardon," and backed out. He didn't stir, and I locked the door to our apartment 3 times over just to make sure. Not my finest memory of France, but certainly one of the more unique. Story 35. So, I have a few stories, but this one stands out because of the trouble I got into. When I was about 12, I was at a sleepaway camp where the boys' and girls' cabins were attached. The girls' side faced a steep hill covered in trees and bush, and it didn't have a door since no one had reason to be back there. Turns out there were some nice puddles out back filled with frogs, so after whatever I was doing, I went searching for some green boys. I found a few, but the puddle was right next to the back door of their showers and locker room. I ended up catching my counselor, unclothed, not getting caught myself, and then proceeded to tell people in my camp group. Eventually, the story made its way back to her, which made things pretty rough between us. The camp had a punishment where you'd be assigned as a co-counselor to a group of younger kids for a week, supposedly to make your punishment useful. Halfway through that week, I caught the lifeguard, who also happened to be a counselor in our group, completely bare in the same showers early in the morning and at night. Needless to say, you'd think I'd have learned by then, but I had. One night, while telling a few kids some stories, I said, "Hey, promise not to tell anyone? I saw the lifeguard unclothed in the showers." Not surprisingly, I got kicked out of that group and they made up a new punishment just for me after that. Story 36. I am a nurse, specializing in high-risk labor and delivery. I am a man, and was the only male nurse on my unit at the time. I was about 28 years old, and one of the housekeepers, Susie, was nearing retirement. She was always really friendly to me, showed a lot of kindness, and always went the extra mile when I needed help. One day I was getting changed, but the male locker room had no shoe covers. So after putting on my scrubs, I went to the women's locker room and started the multi-step knocking process. Door closed with a knock and yell. Door cracked open a couple of centimeters with more yelling. Then the door opened more with, "Okay, anyone?" "Anyone?" "Nothing." "Okay. Coming in." And there was Susie wearing nothing but her underpants and a scrub cap. I remember seeing her chest extending well past her underwear waistband before I spun on my heel and froze, apologizing profusely. "Susie, I am so sorry. I was knocking and yelling. I paused to listen, but I didn't hear you." She said, "Oh, I heard you. I just thought you'd seen it all anyway, so I didn't say anything back." It came out later that she had a bit of a crush on me and was apparently a bit of an exhibitionist. Seeing everything in a clinical setting is very different from literally being baited to catch a peek. Story 37. I was hanging some photos on the wall for my now ex-girlfriend. I heard her sister leave the bathroom after taking a shower, but didn't think much of it. Hearing her approach, I turned to look out of the bedroom door and caught her fully bare walking from the bathroom to her room. She didn't realize I had come to the house, so she screamed and called me a gorilla, then frantically ran to her bedroom to cover up. Story 38. I used to see my next-door neighbor unclothed all the time. Her bathroom window faced the front of her apartment, Every morning when I left for work, she was usually getting out of the shower. I'd come out of my front door, walk along the walkway, and her window would be open to let the steam out. She probably thought no one could see in because the glass was frosted, but the window opened at the bottom, leaving a triangular gap on the side. She had a really perky chesticles and a nice little landing strip. This happened almost every weekday morning. We seemed to be on the same schedule like clockwork. Story 39. My roommate once accidentally caught me unclothed. We lived in a two-bedroom apartment with two bedrooms at one end of a short hallway, a combined kitchen and living space at the other end, and a bathroom in the middle. Our living arrangement was purely economic. We'd met through a friend of a friend of a friend, and had only known each other for about 3 weeks. My roommate was known for sleeping in late on weekends, and I was an early riser. One morning, my girlfriend, now wife, was over. As the first one awake, I started making coffee when she got up earlier than usual and asked if I wanted to join her in the shower. My answer was always yes, but I also like to start weekends with coffee, a joint, and the accompanying bowel movement. I kept joints in the bathroom but forgot my coffee in the kitchen. I figured my roommate was still asleep, so I didn't grab a towel, planning a quick dash to grab my coffee and return. But the moment I turned around with the coffee in hand, I saw my roommate, who simply said, "Oh, hello. I am glad I can laugh about it now." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.